who are out. So again, I'm always assuming you've read this by Thursday. By the way, enjoy your day off tomorrow, whatever you're doing. So humor and health. These next 2 weeks are going to cover humor and health. I'm pretty sure I know where we're going to stop today, just in case. Holding off, going to fill in the blanks with a brief online thing later today when I know where we do stop. So think of it as being divided into 2 parts. Even though, probably as a therapist and a mental health guy, I hate it when we separate like physical health from mental health. I can't stand that. So what am I going to do? We're going to separate physical health from mental health. We're doing physical health this week, and then emotional health and like life satisfaction and well-being next week. So yeah, doing exactly what it is that I hate. But I consider it just one giant package. Chapters 9 and 10, oddly enough, starting with 10 and then going back to 9. So chapters 9 and 10 are all about your health, and that's what today is about. Today is also about stress, because you really can't appreciate what humor can do for your health until you understand how bad stress can be for you, which is why there's a stress test up there. So we're also cracking open Anatomy of an Illness. That's the book that's been collecting dust on your shelf because you haven't read it in a few weeks. I know you used to read it every weekend to your roommates, but that got old. So Anatomy of an Illness, we'll talk a little bit about that today. We're not going to give too much away, because I want you to explore it by yourself. Or maybe you looked on Monday and saw this, or Tuesday and said, hey, I'll crack it open myself. It's not a very long book at all. It's not a large read. In fact, people who are readers, and you probably know what that means, can easily get through this kind of book in like one sitting. They'll just sit down and plow their way right through it. So this isn't like a 368-page epic saga. It's really just the story of what happened to Norman and what inspired him, and that's coming today. The stress test, there you go, and then there'll be a forum post based off of that. So stress test is up there with directions. I think you can figure it out. In fact, I know looking around the room, some of you have done it before in different classes, like, oh yeah, this thing. Well, maybe now you'll see if your stress has changed or if that is not. So chapter 10 and Anatomy of an Illness. There's the far side cartoon, which oddly appropriate for this class. So, and don't forget most of you have taken it and are doing quite well. So the exam number 2 has been up there for a while. I've gotten a few questions, but not a lot. So you do have questions. There we go. Just let me know. So Thursday at midnight, it closes. Well, that's today. So you've got a few more hours to tackle it. The average score so far is about an 89, which is 3 points higher than last time. Yes, I'm a nerd, and I look at those things. So, but if you have any questions, let me know between now and then. I'll be around for a little bit after this, and I'm always out there. You can always contact me. So, have you ever sat down? This is an interesting place to start. The answer to this will be maybe midway through today's lecture. Have you ever sat down and watched a game show and watch how the person does, and you're sitting at home thinking, oh, come on, how could you be that stupid? I should be on there. I should be on there because I would have won $18,000. You're an idiot. How would they let you on? Yeah, of course we've done this. Perhaps, though, never to the extreme of what you're about to watch. So my daughters have gotten into Wheel of Fortune for some reason. I don't know how this happened, but they just started catching it on their own. And so now we have like a house. It's daddy versus the women in the house. So now we're doing this thing. And it just so happens one of the worst contestants I've ever seen on any game show happened to be the Wheel of Fortune. And it's this guy you're about to watch. The question for you is, how is this possible? Because there's actually a scientific reason of how this is very possible and how it could happen to you, even though it's a little bit painful to watch.
You know those people that just do not belong on game shows? Yeah, this guy is definitely one of them.
So a few things for context. It's college night, and I know college students are really rich. So no, small amounts of money would be a big deal to you. So think how meaningful this could be for this poor gentleman from Indiana University. If you didn't catch it, he just landed on the $1 million spot, which is quite hard to do because it's sandwiched between 2 bankrupts. So you might think that fate and karma is on his side until you watch what happens. And yes, I'll be pausing this a lot, so if that bugs you, you can just leave.
Yeah, 4 L's, pick that up, put it over. We're down right away on a London trip down there.
He's so happy. Now, all the letters aren't even up there yet. Now we know it's a character. Would anyone who thinks they're smart like to tell me what you think the solution to this is? Yes, Dominic. Anyone think he's right? I bet he's right. Well, let's see what happens, because it seems rather obvious. It'd be even easier if you could have all the letters, right? What if they were literally all there, and then all you had to do was just say it out loud?
Wow, okay.
That's all.
Oh, that'd be a good idea, yeah.
Mythological hero Achilles.
Okay. Sure.
I'll solve.
Yeah.
Mythological hero Achilles.
Yeah, that's it. When it comes to names, there's letters off there.
You ever wondered what someone's face looked like hours before they murder someone? Yeah, that's the face right there.
Because you have to solve it, which is what you did. You have to say it, and you said it. You get $1,000, which is house minimum. So you have 1,000. But we'll just wipe that clean from the
We will wipe it clean, and you know he's got to be a nice guy. He looks like a really nice guy. And what's the saying? When one door closes, another one opens, right? I mean, it's not $1 million, but what if you could? Okay, so you lost that, but what if I gave you a car? I mean, that's awesome, right? And getting the car is even trickier on the Wheel of Fortune. Not only do you need to land on the car, but they divide it into halves. So during the game, you have to get half the car and then the other half the car and then solve the puzzle. So it's like this three-way thing. So let's see if his luck changes a little bit.
W.
There's a W. Pick up that half car. It's a Chevy Sonic this week. Last around and try to get the other half. Wow. There's an L. Pick it up. You can hold that out. So.
You can even hear it in Pat Sajak's voice. He's so happy for him. He's like, oh my God, thank God this guy, like he lost $1 million. All right, so now we're not guessing the puzzle yet. To get the car, he has to guess a letter correctly. All right, so then it will officially come into his realm. So he's gonna guess a letter. Now we know this is a person. It's a person. So what's one letter he could say? I mean, maybe D, right? He could say D. Because we know it's got to be worlds, right? That's a lot. And maybe it's world's fastest dad. Now, what do you suppose the solution is? I don't know what else it could be, right? So D, we're looking for a D, an M, or an N, because we're looking for a person, not a thing. Person.
300.
Can I solve?
Yeah.
The world's fastest man.
Yeah, that's it.
Well, that's all.
Go ahead.
Oh my God. So I always wonder what this girl's thinking too this whole time. Like she's kind of like most awkward distance between two people ever in the history of time. So he's got one last shot. The world is a wonderful place. You've lost everything, but at least you'll go home with $7,500. Just someone solve the puzzle. It's a thing. That was a great on-the-spot decision, and I think you're right. It's certainly not what's about to come out of his mouth.
On the spot dice spin.
Shelby.
On the spot decision.
Yeah, that's it.
All right, so that's where we begin our little journey. So just keep that in your back pocket, and we'll think of how. I mean, really, I get it. One time is fine. And by the way, if we ever don't have enough light in here, because it's like getting dark, and then it's light, and then it's dark, and then it's light, feel free to click on one of the switches if you'd like to. You're not going to offend me. So keep that in the back of your mind. How is that possible? The answer to that is embedded. Oh, I don't know, maybe 45 minutes from now. So humor and health, this is where we're starting, and we've all heard this phrase countless times. This idea that laughter is the best medicine. And I get it. Laughter feels good, but this is quite an announcement, actually, because is laughter even a medicine? Can it be considered a medicine? In other words, does it have, when we do that fun thing of dissecting it and actually studying it, does this hold up? Because it sounds like a beautiful idea that humor could heal and whatever, but that also sounds kind of trippy and new age, like really? But let's see. what we can find. But first, a question just to keep in the back of your mind as we go forward. Any guesses? Sleep? That's probably not wrong, actually. Like I always, oh man, my kids. Yeah, it's laugh. Yes, isn't this kind of sad? And an observation. By the way, in our little humor study, I just had someone turn in a journal recently, actually today, not in this class, but there was just an immense amount of documentation of laughter. Some of you may know who this person is. But there was over 300. I stopped counting because there was just too many over a three-day period. This just makes me think of this, and she's like, what, 20, 21, something like that. I don't really know. One of the professors that did the study, I feel like I told you guys this, was almost embarrassed. He said, I'm almost embarrassed to give you my journal because he's really sad because he realized how few entries he had. He only had 2, 3 per day. He's like, I never realized I don't really laugh during the day, and I'm not really feeling the humor that I used to feel, and a lot of it has to do with this stuff and the restrictions. But anyway, yes, just keep this in mind. This will come up, the power of laughter and what it might be able to do. So where are we at? Well, with the cognitive chapter, it was pretty easy to think, well, yeah, there's a class you can take here at Mount Union called Cognitive Psych, and that's the crossroads of psychology with humor and cognition, stuff that we just wrapped up. And that's on the tail end of the exam. Well, there's also a field of psychology called health psychology. We actually have a class. I'm not sure if anyone's in it right now, but we have a class here called health psychology, which is all about the biopsychosocial aspects of your health. When we think of health from a psychological perspective, yes, we think of your physical being, your body, the biology of it, but we also think of your social networks, and we certainly also think of your mind, your emotions, your thoughts, your lack of any mental illness or disease. So the health psych class takes a biopsychosocial approach to this. And since this is humor and health, we're also taking a biopsychosocial perspective of this. Today is about the bio. Well, why? Why would... Is it getting too dark in here? It just became like 7:30 at night. Like, honestly, does anyone need a light switch? Okay. If you do, just let me know. I like it like this, but I've always been labeled as weird. My roommates used to make fun of me saying, you live in the bat cave. And I just like things, I've always liked them dim. I don't know why, it's just who I am. So why? There are 3 main reasons why people are appealed to the idea that humor could be a medicine that could help our body somehow. And these are pretty practical. Any ideas what they might be? Why? Other than it just being fun. I mean, we all get that it makes us feel good. But other than just like the laughing aspect of it and the enjoyment, why is this an appealing idea to people? It sure makes people pay attention. This is why Anatomy of an Illness became so popular. Yeah, number 1, absolutely. It's free. You can, I don't care who you are, what income bracket you're from, there's something you can do to make yourself laugh. The second reason, which is somewhat related to that, is it's accessible to everyone. You don't need any fancy equipment. You don't need to buy any membership to anything. It's free. It's easily accessible. And the third main reason is, this is humor we're talking about. You don't have to make any lifestyle changes to enjoy humor. Usually with anything related to health, it comes with those unfortunate things we never want to do, like the lifestyle changes. What do you mean I can't drink alcohol with this? Damn it! Screw that. What do you mean I have to drink lots of water and reduce my caffeine intake? I don't want to do that. Ugh, give me the humor. The humor doesn't ask you to change anything. It just says, here, enjoy this and reap the benefits. So it's appealing, it's attractive. And we'll add something to these so as we go. So there's 3 potential pathways. And all of these pathways have been researched. We'll focus in on some of them, not all of them. We'll definitely get to the first one today. That's On Tuesday, we ended up doing the first one, and by that time, it was time to say goodbye. But there's 6 potential ways or routes that humor could directly impact your biological health. And the first just has to do with laughter itself. I think everyone in this room has probably laughed to the point where you've been tired or exhausted or hurt. I hope you have. If you haven't, it's coming. I hope for you it's coming. But laughter does something to our body. The second is Norman Cousins. We'll get on him in a second. Maybe positive emotions have some type of measurable positive impact on our bodies in some way. From a cognitive standpoint, maybe Freud was right. Maybe instead of experiencing negative emotions, like when your car hits the deer, maybe that magical ability to shift your perspective has a healing or helping quality to it. Maybe humor helps broaden your social network. We know that people with broader social networks are healthier, happier, and they live longer. So maybe that's one way humor helps you, sort of indirectly, by increasing and expanding your social network. Maybe people that enjoy humor more lead lifestyles that are a little bit different. Oh, and we'll also get to this one. I forgot. Maybe humor can have an impact on our aging. What? Teach an adulthood and aging class that some of you have taken. You might remember something from there, but just as you don't need to write this part down, but when it comes to aging, maybe some of you are aware of this, some of you are not. There is a whole field, an army of scientists right now. They've been at this for a while. Not necessarily trying to stop the aging process. I don't think anyone has this idea that we're going to somehow like unlock immortality. Does anyone really want to live forever anyway? But we have come a remarkable long way in understanding how to slow the aging process down. So that's kind of what we're talking about here. So does humor have a place in the aging process? Maybe. We'll see. So yeah, we will definitely do laughter and aging. I forgot that aging is sort of embedded. A little trivia for you for your next cocktail party. This was the original title of Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious before they changed it. Can anyone say this out loud? Have you ever suffered from ankylosing spondylitis? I can keep going. In another life, I had this fantasy. I'm not kidding. Hey, I was an undergrad at Ohio State. I used to have this like daydream that one day, just one day out of my life, would become like a musical. Like you're walking around like campus, and suddenly people become choreographed behind you, and you just break out into song, because that's how musicals work, right? You're just living a life, and then randomly there's a choreographed song that just happens out of nowhere. Anyway, I don't know why I told you that personal fantasy just now. Anyone know what this is? Too much information about Dr. Meyer. Why do I need to know this? Nobody, no one knows what this is. This is a disease. It's a terrible disease that you do not want. It's a disease of the connective tissue inside your body. In fact, what it does is think of all the things that hold you together. Collagen, essentially. Holds your skin to your ligaments to your bones to your muscles, etc., etc. If you suffer from this disease, what starts to happen is the collagen inside your body, the connective tissue, starts to become extremely rigid and brittle to the point where simple movements of any type part of your body become excruciatingly painful. So just moving your right arm to pick up a cup of coffee is a day's work and an effort in and of itself, and something that you just don't want to do. And this is the disease that Norman Cousins suffered from. That's Norman Cousins right there. And the prognosis was very grim. Don't write all this stuff down yet. It's kind of giving you the backdrop. As far as I know, there's no cure for this disease. And other than heavy pain meds, there really doesn't seem to be much in the form of treatment other than just trying to treat the symptoms. The good news is for some people, it's not a very well, it only progresses so far. But in Norman Cousins' case, it was progressing pretty rapidly to the point where his life satisfaction and quality was just completely in the gutter. So he found himself, of course, in the hospital for a very extended amount of time. Luckily for Norman, one of his best friends just happened to be a medical doctor, so not someone who didn't know what he was doing. And Norman Cousins, the longer he was in the hospital, two things were happening. On one hand, the world was learning about the bad things that stress can do to your body. Negative. This is when the research was just coming out that, stress does, and would we all agree that if you don't know, we're actually, the first part of today is walking you through all the terrible things that stress can do to you. Isn't that fun? So we'll end on a good note though, trust me. So we'll actually walk you through that, the stuff that Norman was learning and some new stuff that would have even scared Norman even more. But anyway, it was just coming out that stress it's not just bad, it can actually potentially kill you. So one of his thoughts was, well, I don't know, maybe he saw the world as living in some type of yin-yang balance. His idea was, if negative emotions can kill you and hurt you and make you sick, maybe the opposite is true. Maybe positive emotions can reverse that, or even more dramatically, maybe they can have a healing quality on your body. I mean, intuitively, it makes sense, right? If this exists, maybe the opposite exists. He also observed that, at least for him, maybe this isn't true of everybody, has anyone ever stayed in the hospital for a long period of time? I found myself in high school once for like 12 days. It was miserable. I mean, obviously miserable, but for 12 days I was there, and I had the same realization as a 16-year-old. I remember thinking constantly, like, in terms of getting better, this place sucks. I mean, I know I need to be here, but I'm getting woken up like 13 times a day. I can't fall asleep. There's always people in and out. The walls are like white and as sterile as possible. Nothing about this place is inviting. Not that I expect us to turn our hospitals into like living rooms. Like, that's not what I'm asking. It's just, for Norman, like myself, the hospital wasn't exactly conducive to healing. Nothing about it made him feel better at all. So with the help of his friend, he got himself discharged from the hospital. And get this is where the story takes a bit of a right turn. This is why it got people interested. Part of his prescription, and he did this himself, and it's not the only thing that he prescribed himself, but he prescribed himself certain amounts of purposeful laughter and humor every single day. What? When have you ever seen that on a prescription? Yes, take 2 of these. Oh, and by the way, I need you to laugh for 32 minutes a day. Like, okay. Well, that was his idea, that maybe to start reversing this process, he needs to inject his body with positive emotion. So his friend and him scoured the earth at that point for all the comedic, humorous material they could find. And he did this for an extended amount of time. And that's where the story kind of picks up, and I'll leave it to you. What did he find? Did it work? Did it not? Are there critics? There are certainly critics. But I can't really have you take this class without reading this book. Because when I first mentioned to a professor years ago that I was interested in studying humor, he didn't have it on. I'm like, oh, well, luck would have it. But he actually, a week later, he gave me the book, and I bought you something. I'm like, what the heck is this? I've never heard of it before. And the reason he gave it to me is like, well, if you're interested in this, you need to read this, because this is where it all started. So Anatomy of an Illness is literally the beginning. They call it the humor research book. What a nerdy thing to say about humor. But this book was literally the start of people in any scientific community actually taking humor seriously and starting to study it in any form whatsoever. I mean, before this, Freud had written stuff, and you guys have learned some different theories of humor. But this is when people actually said, hey, maybe humor is something we can actually study. So psychology got involved, the medical science got involved. Foundations were formed. That AATH stands for the American Association of Therapeutic Humor. That actually is a thing. But anyway, a lot of this slide has to do with more context. So we'll revisit this next week briefly, see what you think. But that's Norman Cousins. Let's actually get there. So here we're going to take a little bit of a pause so you can stop taking notes and just absorb this. We're not watching all 56 minutes and 4 seconds if you're watching. We're going to skip around. But this is the story. Oh gosh, in Abnormal Psych, we spend a whole week on stress. But in the next, half hour or so, you're going to get a primer into all the wonderful negative things that stress can do to your body. I guess both to teach you, but also to encourage you to maybe do something about it if you don't already. A lot of people have natural coping mechanisms, but not everybody does.
This program was made possible by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
All of us have a personal relationship with stress, but few of us know how it operates within us, or understand how the onslaught of the modern world can stress us to the point of death. Few still know what we can do about it. But over the last 3 decades, Stanford University neurobiologist Robert Sapolsky has been advancing our understanding of stress, how it impacts our bodies, and how our social standing can make us more or less susceptible.
Is the aggregate values
Most of the time, you can find him teaching and researching in the high-achieving, high-stress world of brain science.
is this huge contrast between
But that's only part of his story. For a few weeks every year or so, Sapolsky shifts his lab to a place more than 9,000 miles away on the plains of the Masai Mara Reserve in Kenya, East Africa. Robert Sapolsky first came to Africa over 30 years ago on a hunch. He suspected he could find out more about human stress and disease by looking at non-humans. And he knew just the non-humans.
You move to a place like this, you're a baboon, and you only have to spend about 3 hours a day getting your calories. If you only have to work 3 hours a day, you've got 9 hours of free time every day to devote to making somebody else just miserable. They're not being stressed by lions chasing them all the time. They're being stressed by each other. They're being stressed by social and psychological tools invented by their own species. They're a perfect model for westernized stress-related disease.
To determine just what toll stress was taking on their bodies, Sapolsky wanted to look inside these wild baboons at the cellular level for the very first time. To do this, he would have to take their blood in the most unassuming way.
Basically, what you're trying to do is anesthetize a baboon without him knowing it's coming. Because you don't want to have any of this anticipatory stress. So you can't just get in your Jeep and chase the baboon up and down the field for 3 hours, and finally, when he's winded, dart him with an anesthetic. The big advantages of a blowgun are that it's pretty much silent and hasn't a whole lot in the way of moving parts, but the big drawback is it doesn't go very far. So what you spend just a bizarre amount of time doing is trying to figure out how to look nonchalant around a baboon. Got him? All right. Okay, he is waddling now. Oh, here he goes.
From each baboon blood sample, Robert measured levels of hormones central to the stress response.
Well, to make sense of what's happening in your body, you've got these 2 hormones that are the workhorses of the whole stress response. One of them, we all know, adrenaline, American version epinephrine. The other is a less known hormone called glucocorticoids. It comes out of the adrenal gland along with adrenaline. And these are the 2 backbones of the stress response.
That stress response and those 2 hormones are critical to our survival.
Because what stress is about is somebody is very intent on eating you, or you are very intent on eating somebody, and there's an immediate crisis going on.
When you run for your life, basics are all that matter. Lungs work overtime to pump mammoth quantities of oxygen into the bloodstream. The heart races to pump that oxygen throughout the body, so muscles respond instantly.
You need your blood pressure up to deliver that energy. You need to turn off anything that's not essential. Growth, reproduction, you're running for your life. This is no time to ovulate, tissue repair, all that sort of thing. Do it later if there is a later.
When the zebra escapes, its stress response shuts down. But human beings can't seem to find their off switch.
We turn on the exact same stress response for purely psychological states, thinking about the ozone layer, the taxes coming up, mortality, 30-year mortgages. We turn on the same stress response, and the key difference there is we're not doing it for a real physiological reason, and we're doing it nonstop.
By not turning off the stress response when reacting to life's traffic jams, we wallow in a corrosive bath of hormones. Even though it's not life or death, we hyperventilate, our hearts pound, muscles tense.
Ironically, after a while, the stress response is more damaging than the stressor itself because the stressor is some psychological nonsense that you're falling for. No zebra on earth running for its life would understand why fear of speaking in public would cause you to secrete the same hormones that it's doing at that point to save its life.
Stress is the body's way of rising to a challenge, whether the challenge is life-threatening, trivial, or fun.
You get the right amount of stress and you call it stimulation. The goal in life isn't to get rid of stress. The goal in life is to have the right type of stress. Because when it's the right type, we love it. We jump out of our seats to experience it. We pay good money to get stressed that way. It tends to be a moderate stressor. We've got a stressor that's transient. It's not for nothing. Roller coaster rides are not 3 weeks long. And most of all, what they're about is you relinquish a little bit of control in a setting that overall feels safe.
All right. Now we're going to start making a list. I'm jumping ahead here. I think that's the right spot. Oh, yes. So, but first, a few basics that are over here that you may or may not be able to see, depending on your eyes and how well they're adjusted to our darkness here. So, a few basics about stress. Number one, you've all heard, that's a good stress, right? No, don't worry. That's I know you're stressed. That's good stress. Your body and your brain do not know the difference between what you would label as a good stressor or a bad stressor. I know we like to label them in this way, but to your body, a stress response is a stress response. It's the same thing on a physiological level. What's also true is your body responds, and that's the point he was trying to bring home. On a physiological level, your body responds exactly the same to a real stressor. And by a real stressor, I would mean something that's in front of you, that's putting you in harm's way, where a stress response would be necessary. For example, if a lion walked into the room, stress response. And you need it. It's real. There's a thing in front of you. However, so imagine what's going through your body when you feel that. If you're worried about an exam, that same physiological response happens. It doesn't. So it can be in your mind. That's why he was making the joke about the zebra. No zebra would understand why you worrying about taxes would make the same physiological thing happen when he's running for his life. In other words, we've done a really good job in our society at creating stressors inside our minds, psychological stressors. We deal with them all the time. And the last point that was brought up there, when you're stressed out, and this will actually bring up our first, well, we're making a list of the bad things stress does to you. This is number one. How many have ever gotten sick at the wrong time? Like, it happens all the time. There's a big race coming up. Why am I getting sick? No. There's a test coming up. No. Why now? Well, probably because you've been worried about it and you're stressed out. Because one thing that stress does, number one on our list, is something called immunosuppression. And that also is related to this third thing that says basics. When you're stressed out, your body goes back to basics. Your body is very, very, very efficient. And your immune system, which is working right now, takes up a certain amount of resources from your body, energy. It's like having the heat on or the air conditioning on. It's always going, but it takes up resources. When your body is stressed out, your body thinks it's in survival mode. It doesn't know you're worried about a test. It thinks you're being chased by a lion. Why? Your immune system, in other words, your immune system just isn't that important right now. The important thing is getting you the hell out of here. And when you're in that mode, immune system is still working, it's just not working very well, which is why you tend to get sick at the wrong time because you're stressed out about it. Your immune system's still working, it's just not working very well.
Anticipating the long reach of stress is a recent idea. For when Robert was Rachel's age, scientists believed stress was the cause of only one major problem.
This is a picture of a major American personnel problem. An ugly sore that doctors call a peptic ulcer, eating away at the wall of a man's stomach. Those stomach pains that you talk about, the gnawing, the burning, those are obvious symptoms of gastric ulcer.
30 years ago, what's the disease that comes to everybody's mind when you mention stress? It's ulcers. Stress and ulcers, stress and ulcers. And this was the first stress-related disease discovered, in fact, 70 years ago.
What I want you to do is to work on your attitude. My attitude? That's right. Ulcers breed on their own kind of feeling. You've got to be honest with yourself about the way you feel about it. Finding a new doctor sounds like a better answer to me.
The connection between stress and ulcers was mainstream medical gospel until the early 1980s. Then, Australian researchers identified a bacteria as the major cause of ulcers.
And this overthrew the entire field. It's got nothing to do with stress. It's a bacterial disorder. And I'm willing to bet half the gastroenterologists on earth, when they heard about this, went out and celebrated that night. This was like the greatest news. Never again were they going to have to sit down their patients and make eye contact and ask them how's it going. So anything stressful, it's got nothing to do with stress. It's bacterial disorder.
So no longer would the solution be stress management. Now it could be something as simple as a pill. It was a major breakthrough. Stress didn't cause ulcers. Case closed. But a few years later, the research took a new twist. Scientists discovered that this ulcer-causing bacteria wasn't unique. In fact, as much as 2/3 of the world's population has it. So why do only a fraction of these people develop ulcers? Research revealed that when stressed, the body begins shutting down all non-essential systems, including the immune system. And it became clear that if you shut down the immune system, stomach bacteria can run amok.
Because what the stress does is wipe out the ability of your body to begin to repair your stomach walls when they start rotting away from this bacteria.
So stress can cause ulcers by disrupting our body's ability to heal itself. If stress can undermine the immune system, what other havoc can it wreak? One answer comes from a colony of captive macaque monkeys near Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
People think of stress as something that keeps them up at night or something that makes them yell at their kids. But when you ask me, what is stress? I say, look at it. It's this huge plaque in this artery. That's what stress is.
For 2 decades, Dr. Carol Shively has been studying the arteries of macaques. Like baboons and British civil servants, these primates organize themselves into distinctly hierarchical groups and subject one another to social stress. Stress hormones can trigger an intense negative cardiovascular response. a pounding heart, and increased blood pressure. So if stress follows rank, would the cardiovascular system of a high-ranking macaque, call him a primate CEO, be different from his subordinate? When Shively looked at the arteries of a dominant monkey, one with little history of stress, its arteries were clean. But a subordinate monkey's arteries told a grim tale.
A subordinate artery has lots more atherosclerosis built up inside it than a dominant artery does.
Stress and the resulting flood of hormones had increased blood pressure, damaging artery walls, making them repositories for plaque.
So the next one on your chain, and this one will live up, and coming up is the Wheel of Fortune guy. It's right around the corner. So the second thing that stress does physiologically in your body, these two things are connected. The first thing that it does is it leads to hypertension. Hypertension, you've probably heard of this before. Now we're starting to sound like a health nut. Hypertension they call the silent killer because there's really no symptoms until it kills you. And it usually kills you by the way of a cardiac event of some kind. Hypertension is just an elevated normal blood pressure. In other words, you've been so stressed out for so long that your body sets a normal blood pressure for you that's actually unhealthy. It's your normal. It's what your body goes back to, but it's not a good, healthy baseline. It's actually above what it should be. That's the state of hypertension. So you could not feel stressed out and still have this elevated high blood pressure, which is why you go to the doctor, you get wellness checks and things like that. So what's the big deal? So you're walking around hypertensive. Well, hypertension starts to increase the rate of something called arteriosclerosis. I know I don't have a big Greek for it. Arterio, so think of arteries. Arteriosclerosis. What that is the hardening of your artery walls. And the hardening of your artery walls is what lets plaque build up inside it. So this is a natural, I guess we're kind of talking about aging now, because this actually naturally happens as we age. Our arteries slowly become firmer, more rigid. That just happens. That's life. But when you're stressed, you speed this process up. Which is why we sometimes can see people who are athletes, excellent shape. They're not obese, they eat perfectly, and yet they can drop dead of a heart attack. We don't know what's going on inside their minds. We don't know how stressed out they are. And we certainly can't see what's going on inside their arteries. They probably never even thought to have them checked because, I'm only 45. I'm in great shape, right? Nothing can stop me. But unfortunately, your physical health isn't all that's important. So hypertension, arteriosclerosis, and now we're turning to the brain a little bit. So far, probably stuff you've heard about before. Maybe not this next one.
So now when you feel threatened, your arteries don't expand and your heart muscle doesn't get more blood, and that can lead to a heart attack. This is not an abstract concept. It's not something that maybe someday you should do something about. You need to attend to it today because it's affecting the way your body functions. And stress today will affect your health tomorrow and for years to come.
Social and psychological stress, whether macaque, human, or baboon, can clog our arteries, restrict blood flow, jeopardize the health of our heart. And that's just the beginning of stress's deadly curse. Robert's early research demonstrated that stress can work on us in an even more frightening way.
Well, back when I was starting in this business, what I wound up focusing on was what seemed an utterly implausible idea at the time, which was chronic stress and chronic exposure to glucocorticoids could do something as unsubtle and grotesque as kill some of your brain cells.
As a PhD candidate at Rockefeller University in the early 80s, Sapolsky collaborated with his mentor, Dr. Bruce McEwen, to follow the path of stress into the brain. They subjected lab rats to chronic stress and then examined their brain cells. The team made an astonishing find. While the cells of normal rat brains have extensive branches, stressed rats' brain cells were dramatically smaller.
So, what are we on? Number 3 on our list? Number 3 on our list. Now, this is a two-parter. The impact that stress has on your brain. And the first, you want to get technical, the word is apoptosis, although you don't have to write that down. Apoptosis is the word that means neural death. So it's anything that kills your brain cells. But stress leads to neural death. The problem is it only picks on one area of your brain. It's almost as if it knows exactly where to go. Does anyone know what area of the brain? Well, I mean, there's no clues here, but what area of the brain does stress attack specifically? Yeah. Oh yeah, I wrote that up there. That's not it. That's not. No, it's a good guess, and because that's up there. Yeah, that's up there for a different reason.
Is it the frontal lobe?
It's not the frontal lobe either. They're just about to say that it has something to do with our Wheel of Fortune guy. The hippocampus. Why would you say that? It's just fun to say. I like saying it too. The hippocampus. Ever heard of the hippocampus before? Remember back from Psych 110? Yes, you're looking at a hippocampus of a mouse. What does your hippocampus do? Learning and memory, which means memory retrieval. We just talked about humor and cognition and the short-term memory, and if you remember, you might have written it down, the episodic buffer, that's the part of your brain that goes into your long-term memory, looks for schemas that get violated so you can laugh, bring it back to your short-term memory. Now we're talking like such humor nerds now, but that's perfect. Well, your episodic buffer is your hippocampus. That's where it's part of your hippocampus. Have you ever been in a time in your life when you've been maybe stressed out for some reason and you can't remember simple information? I'll never forget once being at a party and there was a girl in the psych class that I thought was cute. And I saw her at a party and she asked me for my phone number. And I literally stood there and I couldn't remember my phone. I couldn't say it out loud. Sorry, me, Kevin. No phone, no. That's pretty much how it went. Let's dig a hole and go cry. Yes, yeah, that didn't work out. I would love to say that's my wife today. No, totally different story. But no. So this is what's happening. I'm going to guess that being on a game show, regardless of how cool you appear, is a pretty stressful experience. And so we're prone to make these really silly mistakes. So stress actually affects the hippocampus in 2 ways. Long-term, chronically, you can kill it. In fact, when we look at people who are stressed out, their hippocampi, I like saying that, I'm not sure if that's a word, but that means plural for hippocampus. They're actually smaller. They've shrunk. They're significantly smaller. And we also know people under chronic stress have a harder time learning things, and they have more memory problems. So that's one way it affects your hippocampus. The second way it affects your hippocampus is in the short term. If you have small bouts of acute stress, in the moment you can make really bad decisions and not be able to recall things. Which brings us back to Wheel of Fortune guy. Just in the moment. And then I'm imagining that guy's stressed too. He knows he's made one dumb mistake. And so he's like trying to be maybe over perfect, and then he screws it up again, and by the end he's just like, I've done it. Dice spin. I don't know. Dice spin. On the spot dice spin. But that's actually not where the impact of stress on the brain stops either. I mean, this is bad enough, but there's one other area of the brain that it impacts as well.
And what was most interesting in many ways was the part of the brain where this was happening, hippocampus. You take intro neurobiology, anytime people last 5,000 years, and what you learn is hippocampus is learning and memory.
Stress in these rats shrank the part of their brain responsible for memory.
Stress affects memory in 2 ways. Chronic stress can actually change brain circuits so that we lose the capacity to remember things as we need to. Very severe acute stress can have another effect, which is often we refer to as stress makes you stupid, which is making it impossible for you over short periods of time to remember things you know perfectly well.
We all know that phenomenon. We all know that one from back when we stressed ourselves by not getting any sleep at all. And the next morning at 9 o'clock, we couldn't remember a single thing for that final exam. You take a human and stress them big time, long time, and you're gonna have a hippocampus that pays the price as well.
In addition to undermining our health, stress can make us feel plain miserable. Carol Shively set out to find out why. She began not with misery, but with pleasure. Shively suspected that there was a link between stress, pleasure, and where we stand on the social hierarchy. Just like stress, pleasure is linked to the chemistry of the brain. When a neurotransmitter called dopamine is released in the brain, it binds to receptors, signaling pleasure. Shively used a PET scanner to examine the brain of a non-stressed primate. Our primate CEO.
What we see is that the brains of dominant monkeys light up bright with lots of dopamine binding in this area that's so important to reward and feeling pleasure about life.
Shively then looked at the subordinate's brain.
What we discovered is that the brains of the subordinate monkeys are very, very dull.
What you're looking at on the right, if I didn't know what I was looking at, and you told me this was people, the one on the right is a very, very familiar picture to anyone in the mental health field. That's a brain that's suffering from major depressive disorder. In fact, that's someone who's in the middle of a 6-month-long major depressive episode. One of the hallmark symptoms of depression is something called anhedonia. And anhedonia is the inability to experience pleasurable emotions. This is what makes major depressive disorder so miserable. People with depression can fake it very well, but if they're honest and they know it inside their minds, when they're out with friends, when they're doing things, they're not really having a good time. They can pretend they are so no one can find out about their depression. But imagine if I took all the wires in your brain and unplugged them that were connected to pleasurable emotion. Simple things, and there's a misnomer here. People with depression, they can still laugh, they can still experience humor because that's a cognitive thing that happens inside our brain. But it might not make you feel as good as you used to. You can still laugh, you can still do things, and this is what anhedonia looks like, and it's all related to dopamine. Your body's not responding to dopamine. In fact, what they don't know here, by the way, with stress, they're not sure if it could be one of two things. Either your brain isn't producing dopamine, which is very possible because you're under stress, or it could be that the brain's not responding and recepting the dopamine that's there. But the bottom line is the same, that the brain is not enjoying a normal level of dopamine. And so, in other words, stress can also induce a depressive state if it's chronic. And there's one last one, and for this one, we're making a leap. And this is connected to what that student came up and told me. So far, what do we got? Pretty nasty list. So far, we're having heart attacks. We're not remembering anything. We're becoming depressed. Our immune systems aren't functioning at all. Could it get any worse? Actually, yes. At least, I guess, on your hierarchy of things might be different. But on my hierarchy, this one is the scariest.
The circumstances that produce chronic, unremitting stress.
So, but she lost her balance, and that's the scary.
So they're interviewing these ladies. These ladies are mothers of children with severe disabilities that require 24-hour care. So I would say we'd all agree they're a very stressed out group of human beings.
So we just went out and actually last night bought a new helmet just for fun. And as she's getting older and wanting more independence, it's getting harder.
Each of these women is mother to a disabled child.
For us, my son's only 8, and there's enough I can handle, and I don't allow myself to go too much out. I can't.
I had a friend recently who said to me, I think you really should consider putting Lexi in a home. And that was really stressful in and of itself to think, wow. So, sorry. So I was like, wow, how can you even say that? She's, a girlfriend. She's, even though she can't really communicate, she loves. She loves. She loves. She loves.
These remarkable women came to the attention of biologists Dr. Elizabeth Blackburn.
I don't directly know the individuals, but I know the stories. I'm a mother myself, and so when I heard about this cohort, I really thought it was worthwhile finding out what really is happening at the heart of the cells in these mothers who are doing such a difficult thing for such a long time.
Dr. Blackburn is a leader in the field of telomere research.
We have 46 chromosomes, and they're capped off at each end by telomeres. Nobody knew in humans whether telomeres and their fraying down over life would be affected by chronic stress. And so we decided we would look at this cohort of chronically stressed mothers, and we just...
So we'll get there. So just to interject, if you don't know what those are, some of you have heard of them, some of you this is the first time. On your chromosomes, on all your chromosomes in your body, you have end caps. They're called telomeres. They just described. There's no genetic material in telomeres. Telomeres literally hold your chromosomes together. In fact, the analogy I always make is with shoelaces. They usually have like a plastic end on them. Well, what happens? Have you ever had a shoelace where that goes away and then you can never touch because it starts to fray? That's kind of what happens. Your cells inside your body can only replicate 50 so many times. And every time they replicate, this is kind of morbid, but your cells are kind of like on a guillotine, literally. Every time they replicate, your telomeres get shortened a little bit. And then again, and then again. And once your telomeres are gone, so are you. That's the end. That's aging. And we can actually look at your telomeres. This is wild if you've never heard about this. Just like we can look at a tree and count the rings and say, oh yes, this tree lived through the Civil War. Oh, there's Watergate. Like we can actually, right, we can count them. We can look at your telomeres and guess with very good accuracy how old you are. Because we know as you age, they get shorter and shorter and shorter. So this is, again, this is a natural process that happens. Well, what happens to your telomeres, though, when we're under chronic stress? This is where it gets a little wild.
Decided to ask what's happening to their telomeres and the maintenance of their telomeres. What we found was the length of the telomeres directly relates to the amount of stress somebody is under and the number of years that they've been under the stress.
Such stressed mothers became the focus of a study by Dr. Blackburn's colleague, psychologist Alyssa Epple.
Mothers of young children are a highly stressed group. They're often balancing competing demands like work and child rearing, and often don't have time to take care of themselves. So if you add on top of that the extra burden of caring for a child with special needs, it can be overwhelming. It can tax the very reserves that sustain people. And if they're stressed, if they report stress, they tend to die earlier.
These women have shortened telomeres, decreased activity of this enzyme, and very, very rough number for every year you were taking care of a chronically ill child, you got roughly 6 years worth of aging.
Did you catch that? For every year these ladies are under chronic stress, from a telomere perspective, they're aging 6 years.
This is real. This is not just somebody whining. This is real, medically serious aging going on, and we can see that it's actually caused by the chronic stress.
But there is hope. Dr. Blackburn co-discovered an enzyme, telomerase, that can repair the damage.
It's what I always call the threat of hope.
Preliminary data suggests that a meeting of minds such as this may actually have a health benefit by stimulating the healing effects of telomerase.
And laugh. If you don't laugh, forget it. You can't handle it.
It's what I found is that the humor is something. There's a certain level of Black humor that we have about our kids that only we appreciate. We're the only ones who get the jokes. In a way, we're the only ones who are allowed to laugh at the jokes.
One of the questions in the stress field is, what are the active ingredients that reduce stress and that promote longevity and compassion and caring for others may be one of those most important ingredients. So those may be the factors that promote longevity and increase telomerase and keep our cells rejuvenating and regenerating.
So we spent all this time dealing with stress, and we ended up right where we started which is a discussion about humor. So I'm going to fast forward this real quick just so you can see this. So there's your telomeres, and just another example of this. In fact, this has been out there for a while. I don't care at all. You guys already know this, what your political affiliation is at all. But I'm assuming as long as someone's taking the job even remotely seriously, being the president is probably pretty stressful. I mean, you're always having to go places, right? You got a lot of stuff, responsibility. Have you ever looked at presidents where the day they go in and the day they go out? The best example, one of the best, is little George Bush. You probably think of him as old George Bush, but to me, he's the younger George Bush because I also saw his dad be president for a while. But look what happened to George Bush in just 8 years. Now, mind you, he was president during 9/11 and some pretty stressful things, right? So a lot happened during this guy's presidency. 8 trips around the sun, and he went from being your young father to your great-grandfather. That's incredible. But this is what it looks like when someone gets chronically stressed out day in and day out. It's not just something happening inside your head. It's something that you can actually feel. Now, there's a caveat. If you wrote down telomeres, here's the good news. That this is somewhat reversible, actually. And in fact, if you see him today, a lot of people make the comment, like, you ever heard someone say, oh, you're looking pretty good. Like, what last time I saw you, you look like crap. But now you look okay. No, there's actually an enzyme inside our bodies that we can produce called telomerase. It's just telomeres with ASE on the end. Telomerase. And telomerase attaches to your telomeres and can actually, we've learned, can actually reverse and repair damage that's done. And what's one of the main things we've learned that promotes this? Humor. But a very specific type of humor, and this is what the student came up to me and asked about. And if you think about it, it makes sense. The type of humor that promotes this is what you saw those ladies doing. Social humor. Humor in the context with others, especially humor in the context of close, meaningful partners and relationships. In other words, we actually don't see this benefit when you just sit at home alone and watch something funny on TikTok or whatever it is. I mean, that's funny. That's great. I'm glad you experienced humor. That's good. Not bad. But think about the humor you share with your friends as they were describing. So that special humor that only you understand, it has a deeper meaning to it. There's something different about the quality of that humor and that laughter than just finding a movie that's funny. We don't really have a good distinction. We don't really describe humor in that way as existing in levels very well. In fact, I've never read anything about that, but I think you get it. A lot of heads are nodding. So it's that deep, meaningful social humor that promotes the production of this enzyme. All right, so now we're backing up just a little bit, and you'll understand why that word, the amygdala, is up there. So the stress response in your body, and then we'll wrap up. This all starts with something in your brain called the amygdala. The amygdala in your brain is a very primitive part of our brain. Its job is to detect risk. That's its job. Threats and risk. Think of it like a security guard. And when your amygdala sees, and this is on autopilot, by the way, you're not necessarily in control of your amygdala. When you see a risk, your amygdala lights up, and it communicates with something called your HPA axis, which is up here. That's your hypothalamus, which talks to your pituitary gland, which then in turn talks to your adrenal gland. So that's our chain reaction in our brain. Amygdala lights up, and the amygdala calls the hypothalamus, there's a snake. The hypothalamus relays, hey, it's Dottie. Hey, pituitary gland. How Dottie is that? So the hypothalamus talks to the pituitary gland, which talks to your adrenal gland, and that's where, and then now we're talking about something that actually comes out. Out of your adrenal gland comes 2 chemicals. One you're very familiar with, and this is what Robert talked about in the very beginning, adrenaline. We've all heard of adrenaline, right? That's what makes our heart race and our blood pressure go up. But the one that's actually really bad is the one that we don't necessarily feel. It's the byproduct. And it's something called cortisol, which is why that's up there. He said the word glucocorticoids. That's what he's talking about. Cortisol, incidentally, is the chemical that attacks your hippocampus. It's the chemical that attacks the dopamine receptors in your brain. It appears to be the chemical that attacks your telomeres. So cortisol is this nasty byproduct of the stress response. Short term, no big deal. Stress, in fact, is probably good for us in the short term. So we're not talking about bad things that happen, you get stressed out. What we're worried about is the long-term, chronic worry, stress, anxiety that you might find yourself under because of this word right here. We've already made the list. We didn't really talk about isolation, so it's okay, just to omit that. But this is where we'll turn the page after this to something more positive. The stress response in your body is infinite. In other words, if you're worried for 3 weeks about something, your body is bathing itself in cortisol for 3 straight weeks nonstop. This doesn't shut off. The way we describe it in abnormal psych is like having a leaky faucet on in the background. It's just, you might not always feel it because it's not always intense. But if you're chronically stressed out about something, it's always flowing through your body, and the negative effects are just accumulating slowly over time. Yeah. That's perfectly fine because I'm ready to stop talking about stress.
Oh, okay. So, like, say you're a performer, athlete, after you're like done doing whatever you're doing,
yes.
Is that why you like can't remember stuff in the
moment? Absolutely. It's affecting the part of your brain that's going to be remembering these memories. Absolutely. It's a really good observation. It's also why people, when they're in traumatic situations, can lose chunks of time because during that time, their hippocampus literally was not working. They know they saw things, they know they experienced things, but it's like your recorder wasn't turned on. Like it's running, the machine's running, but you're not actually recording anything. Ready to turn? Oh yes. Sorry, I didn't see the. You got to scream sometimes.
It's not like with like depression, like some other mental illnesses, like memory loss, like a big part of that.
Absolutely, memory loss is attached to a lot of different mental illnesses. Yep, because a lot of our mental illnesses have negative emotion involved. If negative emotion is involved, your HP axis is involved, which means stress is involved, which means the whole system is. In fact, I'm looking around the room. Some people have taken abnormal psych here. In the book that I use to teach it, there's a whole chapter called stress. Look, chapter 5, stress. And the reason is every mental illness is related to stress somehow. That's a common denominator in every single one. So yep, you are exactly right. I don't know why do I go backwards? I'm just going to run into something. All right, well, let's turn the page. But I love the questions. About that laughter. So we'll cover this. So we've actually covered aging. If you didn't realize it. 2 quick points, and I'm going to show you something that maybe you've never heard of that I did at Copeland Oaks with a room full of 80 to 105-year-olds. So first, 2 quick important points about laughter itself. So remember, laughter is not humor. Humor is not laughter. Laughter is the result of humor. It's our behavioral response from it, which can range from subtle to extreme. One interesting thing, our brains, and it appears our body cannot tell the difference between fake laughter and real laughter. So, meaning if there's a benefit to laughter, faking it could be just as good as the real thing. You frighten a lot of people on campus. For the next hour, we're going to walk around in fake laughter. The other thing that we know about it is it's infectious. And what we mean by this is not only does seeing someone laugh trigger mirror neurons inside our brain. If you've never heard of those, mirror neurons are neurons that light up that help us mimic what we're watching, what we see. So not only is laughter infectious in that way, but it's infectious in the way that fake laughter can quickly turn to genuine laughter. Imagine being in a room full of 10 people and staring at each other and pretending to laugh. How long do you think it would take before that turned into real laughter? Probably not very long. And that's exactly what we see happen, which is why there's something called laughter yoga. Have you ever heard of this? Maybe, maybe not. The closest laughter yoga club that I know of is in Akron. But I once led a laughter yoga session for 6 weeks over at Copeland Oaks. And it was fabulous. But if you've never heard of it, this is what laughter yoga is. Not that. Not that. Like this.
These people are laughing for no reason at all. Why? Because research shows that laughing doesn't just signal happiness, it produces it. They say the average child laughs 500 times a day, and the average adult just 40 times a day. We don't know why it makes such a difference in their health, or why we laugh at all, but obviously for these people, it seems to be doing something. I'm going to give it a shot. Okay, Thomas Flint laughs for a living.
We're gonna have 30 minutes laughter session. It's breathing, it's clapping, stretching, and of course, laughing.
He's led laughter yoga classes here in Denmark for more than 10 years.
Just come forward. Yeah. So this don't be afraid.
The concept of laughter yoga is based on this scientific fact. Your body can't differentiate between fake laughter and real laughter. This means you get a health boost even if you fake it.
Incidentally, this is just trivia for your next cocktail party and before you gotta leave, Dominic. And that's fine, I know you gotta go. Anyone else know what's true about Denmark? I mean, our culture looks at something like this and it's like, no. Pass means no. Remember that guy. If you weren't here, I can't have time to explain the joke. But anyway, anyone know the fun fact about Denmark? Netherlands? It's the happiest place on earth. So every year you'll see a poll. They always measure the overall life satisfaction of the populations of different countries. And I think for the last 7 years, that they've come out on top. They're known as the happiest. Their population is the most satisfied. And by the way, life satisfaction doesn't necessarily mean happy. Happy is an emotion. Life satisfaction is just that overall deep sense that life is great and there's nothing I'd like to change. So I'm fine. And they've always been, for the past decade, the happiest place on earth. So we actually know where that is. By the way, you don't want to know where we're at. It's nowhere near. You can probably guess. But anyway.
I have to admit, I was a little skeptical at first, but it didn't take me long to start laughing. And once I started, I couldn't stop. You're probably laughing, just watching.
So this next exercise is about letting go of fear, worry, and stress. So that's all in the mind. So we're gonna laugh at our worry mind. You put up your fingers like this, and then we just laugh at our own worry mind like this.
Clint says most of us forget to laugh because of tension, stress, pain, worry. So he taught us to laugh at our own negative thoughts. I quickly learned it doesn't really matter how you start to laugh. It's just important that you do.
And now give yourself a good stretch.
Studies show that when we laugh, our stress hormones decrease and our endorphins rise. Endorphins are the brain chemicals associated with the runner's high. Laughing is also good for your heart. The study found that only 8% of heart patients who were made to laugh daily had a second heart attack within a year. That's compared with 42% of non-laughing. And get this, just the anticipation of laughter might elicit some of these same benefits as well.
Okay, this is for you, okay? Yeah.
Now it's your turn. Come on, just starts laughing. I have to admit, I didn't think I'd enjoy that as much as I did. But look, laughter is infectious. And I really did feel this energy and this mood boost for the rest of the entire day. And look, there's no question that simply feeling happy can lead to a healthier, longer life. And all of us deserve to have that sense of well-being. One thing I won't ever forget about Denmark, the happiest country in the world, is how they keep family and friends such a priority. It's striking to me that 96% of Danes say they feel like they can call someone in a time of need. They're not alone. There are millions of people around the world, many watching right now, they don't have that same support. Let's change that. Pretty simple. I want you to reach out to someone today, call them, email them, whatever you want, and do it for no other reason than to just say hello. I guarantee you this, it'll make that person's life happier, and I also promise you, it'll boost your happiness level as well. For Vital Signs, I'm Dr. Sanjay.
All right, and to recap a couple of things that he mentioned, so there we go. So here's some of the science behind laughter, what we learned. Now, not every time we laugh do we experience 100 laughs. That's a lot. That would be a pretty significant amount of time of laughing in one sitting. But if you went to a laughter yoga session, which lasts about a half hour, this is very easy to accomplish. And I know it might seem silly to equate laughter with exercise, but again, sometimes, I hope you've had this experience where you laugh so much and so hard that you're literally just tired. I'm tired. And we've actually studied this. And if you do have one of those strong, intense bouts of laughter, from a cardio basis, it's equivalent to about 2 miles, depending on your pace, on the treadmill. If your blood pressure's up the entire time, your heart rate, it's a workout. Not sure if you've ever felt your abs when you're laughing, but it is a workout. It's like you're doing little crunches the entire time. And of course, our respiration can get wild. In fact, I've had times, it's been a long time. I wish it hasn't been a long time. But have you ever had one of those times you've been laughing for so long, you just want people to stop? Like, I just can't. I'm tired. I don't want to laugh anymore. Like, stop. Because every stimulus is just making you go over the top. So there actually is a science to laughing and actually some level of exercise. We also know that when we measure the blood of individuals, we'll do this for our next tumorology. We'll take your blood. Okay, you guys leave the room. You guys laugh. No, but we know that levels of cortisol go down and adrenaline go down. So the very chemicals that are causing a stress response appear less observable in the blood. Yeah. That would be like, ha! Yeah, exactly. So we're talking a lot strung together, right? Which is why probably the only way to achieve this would be doing something like at a laughter club, faking it, laughter yoga, whatever it is. Yeah, so that's what I said. That's a long bout of laughter, which probably doesn't happen very often in a natural setting, put it that way. He also talked about an increase of opiates inside your brain, otherwise known as endorphins. These are pain-reducing chemicals that naturally get released. You know when someone goes in shock? Have you heard of that? Like, oh, they're in shock. They can't. I got stitches once in my life, aside from like wisdom teeth, I guess. This is I was a junior in high school, and I'm gonna tell Team A this story, so listen up. It's just spontaneous. I don't know why I got this idea. No, there was no alcohol involved. I was a very good person in high school. Junior in high school, 3 days before the state track meet, which made me look ridiculous at the state track meet, by the way. And we're at a bowling alley. It was graduation time. I don't remember whose graduation deal we were at. And I had the bowling ball. For some reason, of course, I'm Mr. Comedian, gotta be funny. I thought it would be really hilarious if I, instead of rolling the ball, like ran down the alley and just knocked all the pins down. Like that was my goal. My brain thought that was a good idea. I'm not sure how many of you have been bowling. Everybody, somebody, all of you. Have you ever, now bowling shoes don't exactly have any traction on them for good reason, right? They're very slippery. Have you ever stepped out onto the alley? Ever? I haven't. I had never taken a physical step onto a bowling alley before. It's the only surface on earth that's more slippery than wet ice. I've never in my life, I looked like a giraffe, like learning how to walk. Like I literally took one step and I had the bowling ball in my hand. And it was like, I was like, oh my God, like have you stepped on these? I don't know what they put on them, but it's insane. And it took maybe 5 seconds. And of course, I just completely fell on my back and the bowling ball went up. And I just started laughing because I thought, well, I wasn't hurt, didn't feel anything. What I didn't know is the bowling ball had landed directly on my finger and I was literally like gushing blood. And I'm like laughing and I look at my friends, they're all like, and I'm like, what? And I'm like, what? And I went like that and the blood just went like a horror movie. I'm like, oh my God! I could see them. It was crazy. But I didn't feel anything. Like I was like, why didn't this hurt? Well, endorphins get released. When you go into shock, endorphins get released inside your brain. And he's right. The reason people get a runner's high after something like a marathon is because you're in so much pain. Your body's naturally producing pain relievers, but it makes you feel damn good too. Just like the fake thing. Endorphins feel good. I've always told people, you run a marathon, you're high for a week. You can't walk up and downstairs, but damn, life is great, man. I just can't describe it. So endorphins go up when you laugh. That's a beautiful thing. What else? Now this one surprised a lot of people, especially Nick Brown, the football player. Growth hormone is produced inside our blood when we laugh. Growth hormone is something that a lot of athletes take illegally in their sports. Growth hormone is naturally produced a lot when you're in puberty, as growing. But growth hormone in our body, it still naturally gets produced, specifically when you're in REM sleep. It actually helps your body repair stuff. That's what growth hormone does. You have a cut, growth hormone helps repair it. You're in pain, growth hormone helps keep that down. So laughing, it's like a workout. You're less stressed out. You're taking a bunch of opiates. You're taking steroids. Could there be anything else? Well, this is this one study that was done. Now, this hasn't been replicated, and we all know how important that is. But one study, this is pretty recent, came out. Gupta mentioned this. They took cardiac patients who had had a massive heart attack and had to have some kind of bypass surgery. So we're talking pretty serious cardio events here. 100 people or 50 people in each group. In group A, they said, you guys need to laugh once a day. And in group B, they didn't say anything, just standard care, whatever they do. Maybe they laugh, maybe they don't. But sort of like a Norman Cousins kind of experience. The first group has said, try at least once or twice a day, purposeful extended laughter. And they checked in with them every once in a while. Maybe they gave them a brown journal. So they made sure they did this. And after a year, 8% of the humor group had had a recurrent heart attack, compared to 42% of the other group. Was it the humor? I'd like to think so, but it could also very well be a coincidence because it's never been replicated. But it's out there. Maybe it serves some kind of purpose. So last but not least, this effect gives a name, the endorphin-mediated opiate effect. The idea, this is where we'll head next. It'll be in the online part, but the idea that humor could have some kind of impact on pain and make us feel closer to others. Right? Because with some of our closest friends are the people that we share the most humor with. All right, before we get out of here, let's watch a group of, we'll call them normal people, but what happens when people actually try laughter yoga for the first time? What's their experience like?
I love yoga. And I love laughing. So I'm really excited to put them together. I like laughing.
Yoga, I'm indifferent to.
To be frank, I have no idea what the fuck's going on here. I have no idea what's gonna happen today.
I'm sure this is echoed by my fellow testies, but, this is weird.
I feel like I won't be able to keep it together.
For some reason, I have this image in my brain that like we're all just gonna sit in a circle, like crisscross applesauce.
Namaste. I'm a yoga teacher. That's what yogis say, right? Sure. Yeah, I'm here to introduce you guys to laughter yoga. What is that? Laughter yoga is, it's just basically getting together and laughing for no reason.
Do you like break a sweat?
No, not necessarily. You just break a chuckle.
Break a chuckle.
Break a chuckle.
The first thing I want to teach you is after every game, we're going to do this. We're going to go, very good, yay! Try it. Very good, yay!
For some reason, I had in my mind that we were going to be doing a lot of exercises, but it was really more just silliness.
So we're going to go to a laughter party, all right? So you're going to imagine that you're sleeping in your bed, and imagine you're having a funny dream. And just laugh to yourself. And let's go into the shower. And you have a laughter shower. So when you turn on the water, you have laughter water.
You have the most infectious laughter I've ever heard. Like, I feel like part of why I lost myself is because he had such a great laugh that I lost it.
Okay, very good, yay! So let's go to the party, right? So we're gonna go to our car. You have one of these old laughter cars, okay? So, and it works kind of like you know those lawnmowers? It's a little old.
As we just sort of laugh more and more, something about what was happening, which is so funny.
He told us we were going to meditate.
And I was kind of like, oh, I don't really know if I want to end this whole thing on like a really calm meditation.
And then, man, very deep outside of outer space, imagine a little giggle rocket coming towards you.
When you say giggle rocket, I just lost my shit because, come on, giggle rocket is a hilarious phrase in general.
It's coming right towards us, guys. End of the world. Namaste.
I loved it all. I would do this again.
I feel like I just got a massage. I felt like I was high the entire time I was doing that.
Feeling pretty charged up. Daydream.
That was perfect for someone like me who's giggling like 24/7 anyway.
Being in it and just completely losing yourself in the process is something that's hard for me to do, to be honest, and today that actually happened. So kudos to the laughter man.
Very good, yay! You look a lot like.
So, there's something else on the PowerPoint. Well, there's two more things to write down about laughter yoga, and we'll get out of here. So, the first thing you don't need to write down. Just take my word for it. The hardest part about laughter yoga is getting people to try it. Like actually, okay, just take it seriously and give it a try. Because once they do, it doesn't take long before they're hooked. So when we ask people about their experience with laughter yoga, one of the first things they say, one of the first two main things they say, put it that way, don't you love our little list that we made? The first thing is they felt, and the reason they go back to it, is it's the only thing that they've experienced in their life as adults that makes them feel like they're 5 years old again. How many adults walk around this planet and say, man, what would it be like to be a kid again? Because if you don't remember what it's like to be a kid, come over to my house. My 13-year-old doesn't do this so much anymore, but the 9-year-old still does. Like, she'll be sitting on the couch, like last night. This is a perfect example. I'm going down just for something else, and she's just watching TV, she's watching the Disney Channel, and I walk past her, and as I'm walking past her, she just like rolls down the couch, like, and then rolls after me, and then just stops and goes, Like, what the hell is that? That's my daughter. What is she doing? Just being 9. I mean, that's what you do. You'll be walking around, all of a sudden you just go, because they're having fun. Like to them, life is just, it's goofy. And people say, man, going to this laughter yoga for 30 minutes, I felt like I was literally 7 years old. It was fantastic. The second thing that they say is, well, it was kind of captured by one of those, I can't remember her name, but she talked about how she felt like she was giggling the whole time. There's actually a name for this. It's the opposite, and incidentally, it's the opposite of one of the major symptoms of depression. Depression comes along with something called dysphoria, which means you're highly susceptible to sadness. The opposite of that is a state of euphoria. Euphoria is a state of being where you're highly susceptible to bouts of happiness, which might sound ridiculous, but the best way I can describe it is, have you ever had a case of the giggles? Right? This also is something that happens to children quite a bit. I used to get in trouble for this quite a bit in 2nd grade math class. There's a kid that sat in front of me named Aaron, just made me laugh. So just being around him, I would start oh man. But has this ever happened to you that you just can't stop giggling? It happens to the kids in the back seat all the time. Well, that's a state of euphoria. And it induces that. They actually, almost all of them describe that. Like, man, for a half hour. And it's because of that infectious state of humor, or laughter, excuse me, in your brain, not understanding the difference. You see it fake, but it instantly becomes real. And with that, we're out of time. So, told you, we started off in the dark place, but we ended up in a positive place. So if you haven't done it yet, you still have 9.5 hours to take the exam. And